I cannot tolerate an employee harassing me. We need to get her out, fix this.
I promise I'm not lying. I donated my kidney to him, thought he'd recognize me. Please don't fire me.
It was the height of the harmattan in Enugu. The air was dry, and the campus grounds of the University of Nigeria were coated with red dust that clung to shoes and hem trousers. Inside a tiny hostel room barely large enough for 2 beds and a table, Ngozi sat hunched over her books, reading under the dim light of a rechargeable lantern. She was 22, the first from her family to make it this far in education. Her father was a retired civil servant who still sold roasted groundnuts by the roadside to keep food on the table. Her mother traded vegetables in the local market. Between lectures, Ngozi worked part-time as a cleaner at a local restaurant and as a private tutor for secondary school students. Every naira she earned went into school fees, textbooks, and a small contribution to help her younger siblings still at home. Her final exams were only weeks away when the news came. She heard it first on the radio crackling from the neighboring room, a desperate plea interrupting the usual music programs. "Urgent call for a kidney donor," the announcer said. "Young man, 25, critical condition at City Hospital. Family is willing to pay 5 million naira for any compatible donor who can save his life." Ngozi froze. A kidney donor? 5 million naira? That was enough money to not only finish her degree, but also pay for her siblings' education and lift her family out of poverty. Yet what struck her was not the amount, but the voice of the mother who came on air after the announcement, weeping into the microphone. "Our son Daniel is dying," the woman sobbed. "He has always been a good boy, worked so hard to build his business from nothing. Please, if you are out there and you can help, save him for us. God will bless you." The words stayed with Ngozi through the night. By morning, she had made up her mind. She borrowed transport fare and went to City Hospital. The sight that greeted her was worse than she had imagined. In a private room lay Daniel, pale and frail, connected to machines that beeped steadily. His father, a tall man with tired eyes, sat in the corner, head in his hands. His mother paced the corridor outside, praying under her breath. When Ngozi introduced herself as a potential donor, their relief was almost overwhelming. But not everyone shared their joy. When Ngozi told her parents what she planned to do, they reacted with fear and anger. "Are you mad?" her mother cried. "You are our first daughter. Do you know the risk of this surgery? Do you know what happens if something goes wrong?" Her father begged her to think of her future. "Ngozi, this is a stranger. You owe him nothing. If God wants to save him, he will find another way." But Ngozi's mind was set. "Maybe I am the way God wants to save him," she said quietly. She returned to the hospital, signed the papers, and went through the painful compatibility tests. When the results confirmed she was a perfect match, Daniel's family offered her the 5 million Nigerian nairas reward immediately. She refused. "I am not doing this for money," she told them, her voice steady. "If I take it, it will no longer be a gift from my heart." When Daniel regained consciousness days before the surgery, he asked to see her. They spoke for hours. He was stunned that a young woman from a humble background would make such a sacrifice for a man she had never met. "You have given me a new chance at life," he said, gripping her hand. "I can never repay you." The surgery was long but successful. When Ngozi woke up, weak but alive, she saw Daniel's parents weeping by her bedside. Daniel himself, pale but smiling, mouthed a thank you. Before she left the hospital weeks later, Daniel called her to his room.
"I won't insult you by offering you money again, but I will pay for your final year's tuition. Consider it an investment in your future."
And here, he pressed a slip of paper into her hand. "This is my personal number. If you ever need anything at all, call me." It was a bittersweet farewell. She walked away lighter, her heart full of hope. She believed she had made a difference. For the first year after the surgery, Daniel kept his promise. He called Ngozi every few weeks, checking on her health and asking about her studies. On her graduation day, he was there, dressed simply, standing among her parents, clapping as her name was called. He even handed her an envelope with money, enough to throw a small celebration and buy herself a proper pair of shoes for job interviews. But life has a way of sweeping people into new currents. Daniel's business, a small tech company he had started before his illness, began to grow rapidly after his recovery. He was traveling often, signing new contracts, meeting investors. The calls became less frequent. Months would pass without a word from him. Ngozi didn't mind at first. She was busy too, searching for a job in a city where thousands of graduates competed for the same limited opportunities. Despite graduating with honors, she found herself working temporary clerical jobs and tutoring neighborhood children to make ends meet. She still believed Daniel would one day come through with the career opportunities he had promised. She called him occasionally, leaving polite messages with his assistant or on voicemail. "Tell him it's Ngozi, from the hospital," she would say, as though reminding them who she was. Weeks passed. Months. The calls were never returned. Life moved on. Ngozi married James, a quiet young teacher she met through church. Their wedding was modest, with neighbors cooking jollof rice and carrying plastic chairs into her parents' yard. Soon after, she gave birth to Emeka, then Chioma 2 years later. They were happy, at least for a time. James' teaching salary was modest, but it covered rent, food, and school fees. They lived in a cramped one-bedroom flat, but it was home. Then came the downturn. The state government announced budget cuts, and James' school laid off nearly half its teachers. He searched for work for months, growing thinner with each rejection. The savings quickly disappeared. Rent piled up. Sometimes they went to bed on nothing but Gary soaked in water. By then, Daniel had become a name known across Nigeria. His tech company had gone public, and he was now counted among the youngest billionaires in the country. His face appeared on magazine covers, smiling confidently, hailed as one of the great business minds of the decade. Ngozi felt a bitter twist in her stomach every time she saw him on television or heard his name on the radio. The man whose life she had saved was now enjoying every luxury imaginable, while she and her children were one step away from being thrown out of their home. It was during this time that Ngozi began to feel the first sharp pains in her side. At first, she ignored them, thinking they were stress-related. But the pain grew worse, spreading to her back, leaving her weak and nauseous. A doctor's visit confirmed what she feared: complications from the kidney surgery. She would need regular treatment and expensive medication to stay healthy. The news nearly broke her. "How can I not even afford to take care of myself?" she thought, "after giving part of my body to save another person's life?" With trembling hands, she wrote Daniel a letter. She poured out her heart, explaining her condition, her family's struggles, and the desperate situation they faced. She sent it by courier to his company's headquarters, praying it would reach him personally. Weeks passed. No reply. Ngozi began to lose hope. Every night, she lay awake listening to her children's soft breathing, wondering how she would keep them in school, wondering what would happen if her health failed completely. Each time she saw Daniel's face in the news, smiling, shaking hands with government officials, talking about innovation, it felt like a cruel joke. "The man whose life I saved is living like a king," she thought bitterly, "and I can't even afford the medicine to keep myself alive." Her husband tried to encourage her, but even he could not hide the frustration in his voice. "You did a good thing," James told her one night, "but perhaps you expected too much in return." Those words stung. It was not money she wanted, not even luxury, just a little recognition, a reminder that her sacrifice had not been forgotten. When the landlord delivered an eviction notice, giving them just 1 month to clear out, Ngozi sat in the dark corner of the room and wept until her chest hurt. The girl who had once been hailed as a hero was now alone, forgotten, and running out of options. By the time the eviction notice expired, Ngozi had swallowed every ounce of pride she had left. She could not allow her children to sleep under a bridge. She needed steady income, any income, even if it meant starting from the bottom again. She scoured job boards, asked friends, begged former employers for recommendations. That was when she saw it: a posting for an executive assistant position at Okoro Tech Industries. The salary was far more than she had ever earned, and the listing promised health benefits. She didn't care about the title. All she saw was a way to keep her children in school, pay rent, and maybe afford the medication she badly needed. On the morning of the interview, Ngozi wore her best clothes, skirt that had faded from many washings. She wrapped her hair neatly and took 2 buses to get to the company's towering glass office building. The HR manager, a young man with rimless glasses, was impressed by her credentials. Despite years of struggle, she still spoke with the confidence of an educated woman. She explained her past administrative jobs and her determination to grow within the company. The manager smiled and told her they would call her. But the call came just hours later. She had been hired. She was to start the next week. For the first time in years, hope returned to Ngozi's heart. She threw herself into the work with everything she had. She arrived early, stayed late, and handled tasks quickly and with precision. Soon, colleagues began to respect her for her diligence and soft-spoken kindness. She was told the CEO, Mr. Daniel Okoro, was a very private man. She would mostly work with department heads and might never meet him directly. Weeks passed before she saw him for the first time. It happened during a quarterly staff meeting held in the large conference hall. Ngozi was arranging files at the back of the room when she saw him step onto the stage. Her heart nearly stopped. It was Daniel, the man whose life she had saved, the man she had waited years to hear from. He looked different now, taller somehow, more confident, dressed in a sleek suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary. But his face was unmistakable. As he addressed the staff, speaking about profits, growth, and future expansion, Ngozi felt tears welling in her eyes. When the meeting ended, she waited near the corridor, heart pounding like a drum. This was it. This was the moment she had dreamed about. The reunion, the warm gratitude, the acknowledgement of her sacrifice. When he finally walked past, surrounded by assistants, she stepped forward and smiled through her tears. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling. "It's me, Ngozi." He stopped, looked at her, and frowned slightly as though trying to place her face. "I was the one who donated my kidney," she said quickly, lifting the side of her blouse just enough to reveal the faint surgical scar. 10 years ago, at City Hospital, I saved your life." The corridor grew quiet. A few staff members turned to look. Daniel's expression hardened. "I'm sorry," he said coldly. "I don't discuss personal matters at work. Please go back to your department." Ngozi stood frozen, her smile fading as he walked away. She waited for him to call later, to explain himself, but no call came. Instead, whispers began to circulate in the office. People avoided her in the cafeteria. Tasks suddenly piled on her desk, impossible deadlines, unnecessary revisions. It was as if someone wanted her to fail. But in that first moment, the moment he looked at her and did not see her, something inside Ngozi broke. This was not the reunion she had imagined. This was rejection. The man she had risked her life for had erased her from his memory as though she were nothing. From that day onward, Ngozi felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The office that had once felt like a place of new beginnings quickly became a hostile battlefield. Tasks began appearing in her inbox late at night, with unrealistic deadlines. Reports she submitted, carefully prepared and cross-checked, were returned with vague comments like incomplete or not professional enough. It wasn't long before she discovered the source. Daniel had gone to HR and reported that an employee was harassing him with claims about a supposed kidney donation. HR called Ngozi in for a formal meeting. Sitting across the long table, she explained patiently, her voice breaking, that everything she had said was true. "I am not lying," she said, pulling out her medical records, copies of her surgical discharge papers, even a yellowed newspaper clipping from 10 years ago that featured her photo alongside a headline. "Young student donates kidney, saves businessman's life." The HR manager barely glanced at the documents before sliding them back across the table. "The CEO, who does not wish to be disturbed by personal matters," he said coldly. "Please keep all future interactions strictly professional." Word began to spread around the office. Whispers followed her down the hallways. Some called her a liar. Others said she was trying to extort the CEO for money. People who had once greeted her with smiles now averted their eyes when she passed. Daniel's retaliation became more deliberate. One morning she arrived to find that her system access had been limited. She could no longer view certain files she needed to do her work. Later, she was accused of missing deadlines for projects she had never been informed about. Her supervisor called her into his office. "I don't know what's going on with you," he said, shaking his head. "But the CEO is very unhappy. You need to get your act together." Each passing week felt like walking through fire. She started staying late at work, trying to meet up with demands. The stress began to take a toll on her body. The pain in her side returned, sharper this time. But she pushed through because she could not afford to lose the job. Then came the final blow. One morning, she was summoned to HR again. 2 security guards were already standing by the door when she entered. On the table lay a folder with documents marked termination notice. "You are being dismissed," the HR manager said flatly. "The reasons are poor performance, violation of company policy, and creating a hostile work environment by spreading unverified personal claims against the CEO. Ngozi's mouth went dry. "That's not true," she whispered. "I have done nothing wrong. I have proof." "Please sign the papers," the manager interrupted, sliding them toward her. "If you refuse, we will mark this as termination without notice." Tears blurred her vision as she signed. Security escorted her back to her desk. Her colleagues stood watching as she packed her few belongings into a cardboard box. Some looked away. Others whispered. No one spoke to her. As she was led out of the building, she felt the hot shame burning her face. The same company that had given her hope now cast her out like a criminal. But Daniel was not finished. Within a week, every job application Ngozi sent out was quietly rejected. A former colleague confided in her in secret. Daniel had blacklisted her across the industry, warning that she was a troublemaker. Back home, the situation became unbearable. Without income, they were soon unable to pay rent. The landlord returned with eviction papers. That night, Ngozi sat alone in the dark, her body aching, her spirit shattered. She had given life to a man who now treated her as though she were his enemy. The humiliation, the whispers, the eviction notice lying on the table, all of it pressed down on her like a heavy stone. For the first time since the day of the surgery, she began to wonder if her decision had been a mistake. What Daniel did not know was that he had not silenced Ngozi's story. He had only planted the seed for its eruption. One of her colleagues, a quiet young man who had always admired her dedication, had secretly recorded the entire termination meeting on his phone. He had seen enough to know she was being treated unfairly. After she was escorted out, he uploaded the video to TikTok with the caption, "This woman donated a kidney to our CEO 10 years ago. Today he fired her for reminding him." The video spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. By nightfall, the hashtag kidney donor betrayal was trending across Nigeria. People were outraged. Hospital staff from City Hospital began posting their own memories. A retired nurse shared a photo of Ngozi on her hospital bed after the surgery and also confirmed publicly with the support of a doctor that Ngozi had refused the 5 million Nigerian nairas reward at the time, insisting she was saving a life, not selling a body part. The story became national news by the next morning. Newspapers called her the saint who saved a life for free. Talk shows debated the moral bankruptcy of a billionaire who could forget such a debt. Protests began outside Okoro Tech headquarters. People carried placards with words like "Remember Ngozi" and "No Justice, No Peace." Investors panicked. Within 2 days, the company's stock price plunged by 60%. Major clients began canceling contracts, citing the reputational risk of being associated with such a scandal. Inside the company, board members convened emergency meetings. They were furious at Daniel, accusing him of dragging the company into a public relations disaster. "Either you fix this," the chairman told him, "or we will remove you from the CEO position." But the worst blow came from home. Daniel's mother called him in tears. "Daniel, how could you?" she sobbed over the phone. "That girl saved your life. Do you think we would even have you today if she had not stepped forward? What kind of man have you become?" Her words pierced deeper than any headline. Daniel's confident public image began to crack. He could not leave his house without cameras flashing. Online, millions of strangers cursed him daily, calling him an ingrate, a monster. His face, once celebrated on magazine covers, now became the symbol of betrayal. Alone in his mansion one night, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed and wept. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to remember every detail of that hospital room. The girl with tired eyes, the soft-spoken voice saying she was doing this because God wants me to save him. He saw again the faint scar on her side and realized, with a shudder, that he had turned the woman who gave him life into a public laughingstock. It broke him. The next morning, Daniel showed up at Ngozi's small rented house unannounced. When she opened the door, she found him standing there, the man she had once saved, now hollow-eyed and trembling. He fell to his knees before her children, tears streaming down his face. "Ngozi," he said, his voice shaking, "I remember everything now. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I am begging for it. I have been a fool." For a long moment, she just stared at him, her heart heavy with all the pain she had endured. Then she said softly, "I forgive you. But forgiveness does not erase consequences. Daniel nodded, wiping his face. In the days that followed, Daniel held a public press conference. He admitted to everything: the firing, the blacklisting, the cruelty. He announced the creation of a 10 billion Nigerian nairas fund in Ngozi's name, dedicated to supporting organ donors across Nigeria with medical care, education for their children, and financial assistance. He personally covered Ngozi's medical bills, paid for her children's education through university, and publicly acknowledged her as the reason he was alive. Slowly, public anger turned into respect. People admired him for owning up to his wrongdoing and taking responsibility. The company's reputation stabilized, and though some clients never returned, the business survived. But for Daniel, the lesson was deeper than money or reputation. He began volunteering at the foundation Ngozi started, a quiet, unglamorous job that required humility. He sat with other donors, listened to their struggles, and used his wealth to make sure none of them ever went through what Ngozi had endured. As for Ngozi, life finally turned. She got a better job through public support, one that allowed her to work from home and spend time with her children. The fear of eviction was gone. The pain that had haunted her for years slowly began to fade. And every time she saw Daniel working alongside her at the foundation's events, not as a billionaire CEO, but as a man who had been humbled, she knew she had won. Because in the end, justice was not just about punishing him. It was about reminding him, and the world, that true wealth was not measured in billions but in the lives we honor, the promises we keep, and the debts we never forget.